I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and behind me is the Volkswagen Tiguan R. But not just any Tiguan R, this is a pretty special one. The Tiguan R Grid Edition is $6,500 cheaper than the standard Tiguan R, and that's a really good saving. But the most exciting thing about this car is that you can get one right now, because Volkswagen Australia has had 300 of these Tiguan R Grid Editions built for our market, dodging the parts that are causing semiconductor shortages for Australian buyers. So this vehicle, for instance, does not have power seats and it does not have a power tailgate. If you can get over that hump, then you can get into this sporty SUV much faster than the standard Tiguan R. However, it's funny how things turn out, because in actual fact, the Volkswagen factory has now let Australia know that it'll be able to build 100 full-fat Tiguan Rs every single month. So you can either get into a Grid Edition right now, or you can wait a few months and get into a car with leather, power tailgate, matrix LED headlights, and the other stuff this spec misses out on. So, should you save the $6,500? In this video, I'm going to let you know a clear yes or no. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Within the Tiguan lineup, which is vast, covering 16 different specifications, the R Grid Edition is second from the top. I've already mentioned that it's $6,500 cheaper than the regular Tiguan R, but it's $6,200 more expensive than the excellent Tiguan 162 TSI R line, which should definitely still get your consideration. It's just very difficult to get your hands on one of those quickly because of supply shortages, but there are cheaper special editions of the 162 TSI that are worth considering. But here in the proper full-fat Tiguan R Grid Edition, we get a lot more power, 235 kilowatts for a start, but we also get a bunch of components that remind you that you're in the true R version of the Tiguan, rather than just an R line. That starts here with what you're looking at, a proper R steering wheel with perforations on the side, and then really big paddle shifters for controlling the 7-speed DSG Auto manually, if you'd like. But then we also have completely unique seats for the Tiguan R Grid Edition. And this is one area that the Grid is actually a lot cooler than the standard Tiguan R, because we have these sports buckets with integrated headrests. They're covered in micro fleece and cloth, and they've got a really cool sort of blue tartan pattern on them. I really like them. They are manually adjustable, manual lumbar on both seats, but they do have seat heating, which is still a nice to have. Now, if you go for the full-fat Tiguan R, you get leather seats, but they don't have this cool integrated component up here. They look a little bit more standard, like they're from a regular Tiguan, which is interesting to know. Now, in terms of the tech, we've got a 9.2-inch touchscreen here, navigation, wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, and a 10.25-inch digital screen in front of us, which is customizable, modular. The tech is intuitive in this car, and it works well. And also, even though we only have the base Tiguan stereo, which is an 8-speaker unit, it sounds really good. That's one of the secrets of the Tiguan, is that the regular stereo sounds good enough. You don't actually need to go for the upgrade in this car. When it comes to storage, the Tiguan's great. Huge flockline door bins, big tray ahead of the shifter. We've got big cup holders here, big box with an adjustable armrest, which is absolutely awesome. And in terms of the materials, it's mostly good, feels pretty plush and premium, although it's always been oddly hard down here, the Generation 2 Tiguan. So if you've got long legs, they do kind of tend to rest up against this hard piece on longer journeys. May or may not be an issue for you. I also want to bring up the T-Roc R and T-Roc R Grid Edition. They are a size smaller than this car. They're still remarkably practical though, and also it's considerably cheaper. So if you're looking for a go-fast Volkswagen R SUV, don't forget about the little T-Roc as well. But what the T-Roc R doesn't have is a massive back seat. If you want loads of second room space in a Volkswagen R product, you'll need to go for a Tiguan R, just like this car, or a Golf R wagon, which are as scarce as hen's teeth in Australia. So we're really talking about getting a Tiguan R, aren't we? And the Grid Edition is just as good as a regular car in many ways, apart from one. Because the seats are not leather, at least not the outboard seats, cleaning up spills is going to be a little bit more difficult if you have kids of an age that are prone to tipping over drinks or vomiting or whatever. So if you do want to have an easy clean interior, you're going to want to splash out for the more expensive Tiguan R, which does have leather covering all of the seats. Now in terms of the amenities back here, we've got two air vents, we've got a separate climate zone, a third USB-C port, and a 12-volt socket as well. So you can of course put more USB-Cs in via the 12-volt if you prefer that. On the back of these seats, we've just got one map pocket per seat. We don't have the additional storage pockets that you get on a regular Tiguan. We do have a flip down armrest though with 2.5 cup holders. These back seats, they're actually on rails, so they slide so you can have more boot space if you prefer. They also recline relatively deeply, or you can sit bizarrely upright if that's what you find comfortable, or you can find a midpoint just like that. Now you do get harsher materials here in the back, but the armrest itself is still padded, and we get this really nice micro fleece insert in all of the doors of the Grid Edition, which is cool. Moving around the back gives us a good opportunity to talk about how you can tell a Grid Edition version of the Tiguan R from outside, because it's a little bit more difficult than on the T-Roc R Grid Edition, which has completely different wheels to the standard car. The Tiguan R Grid Edition shares the regular version's 21-inch Estoril alloy wheels, which look really cool. It is a massive wheel for a Tiguan though. It really fills those wheel arches nicely. In terms of the color palette, it's fairly limited. You've got this dolphin gray, black, or lapis blue, the classic Volkswagen R color, but you will notice around the body there's much more black highlights than chrome. The standard Tiguan R runs with chrome and matte aluminium outside. You basically get a standard black pack on the Grid Edition, and I know that a lot of people prefer a black pack. For myself, I prefer the aluminium styling package. However, around here on the back, you'll also notice a little Grid Edition badge on this tailgate, which is manual. Not the end of the world though, because it is assisted by reasonably powerful gas struts, and that boot door gets out of your way to reveal 615 litres of space. Now that's if the second row is pushed all the way forward. If you bring it back, it's probably closer to that 500 litre mark, which is how it is now, but we've got all of our bulky AV gear in the back here, and we still have a decent amount of room left over. Now, one thing to note if you do country touring though, is that the Tiguan R and the Grid Edition, neither of them have a spare of any kind, which is a little annoying for touring in Australia, and it's one way that this vehicle differs from the T-Roc R, which actually does get a space saver spare. Not as good as a full size, but certainly half decent peace of mind. Now here in the boot, you can fold down the back seats remotely, super easy. We've got cargo hooks as well. We've got extra space off to the left and right. And because we don't have a spare, we actually do have quite a lot of room underneath the hard boot floor. Closing the tailgate, obviously not as easy as if it were electric, but it's also relatively easy to achieve. When it comes to running costs, the Tiguan R is a little on the pricey side for a family SUV, but that's because it's rocking a 235 kilowatt 2-litre turbo and an all-wheel drive system with a tricky diff on the rear axle. So there's a lot of complexity going on here, and that actually kind of makes the 5-year service plan price of $3,200 reasonably fair, because there is a lot to service on this vehicle. Now, when it comes to fuel consumption, Volkswagen claims 8.8 litres per 100 Ks combined, and that is actually quite doable. On the open road, you'll get 7.5 or so. In town, you should expect maybe 10 or 11. Sporty driving will see your consumption head up to 13 or 14 in my testing, but I think that's all reasonably acceptable for a mid-size SUV with this kind of engine at just under 1,800 kilos. Now, in terms of insurance, in the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $1,096 to comprehensively insure a new Volkswagen Tiguan. Everybody's situation varies, and your premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, how you garage the car, and your driving history. And the warranty on this vehicle is 5 years with unlimited Ks. So, what's it like to drive the new Volkswagen Tiguan R Grid Edition? Well, it's very much like driving the regular Tiguan R, which is an accomplished, if quite firm, sports SUV. I don't think that you should accidentally buy a Tiguan R without at least test driving it first, because I think you should really test drive this car and the 162 TSI R-Line version of the Tiguan to decide which one is really right for you and your family. Now, neither of these cars are particularly harsh or rough, but the Tiguan R is definitely considerably stiffer than the R-Line version of this car, which could be a more balanced option for some families. Now, I'll come back to the ride and handling in a moment, but let's talk about the thing that everybody loves the most about the Tiguan R, and that's the engine, because we've got the best and most high-performance engine in this version of the Tiguan. It's the EA888 2-litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder, but it's in its latest generation format here with 235 kilowatts of power and 400 Newton meters of torque, and that's good enough, Volkswagen says, for a 0 to 100 km/h sprint of 5.1 seconds. Well, we tested it, albeit on the slightly heavier full-fat Tiguan R, and we got 5.12 seconds. Now this car throws out a whole bunch of heavy componentry from that car, so I reckon it's possible the Grid Edition could even beat that time, and I look forward to testing that independently soon. Equally, on the braking front, the Tiguan R is pretty strong, although not quite as impressive as the smaller T-Roc R, which manages really short emergency braking distances. Now the engine itself, it sounds pretty good when you rev it out. You can change various exhaust sound modes through the touchscreen here. I've just got it in pure at the moment to listen to the actual engine sound, because in this car you can turn off most of the pumped in noise, but one of the things you can't turn off is pumped in vibrations that come from a box called the Soundaktor, which sits just there at the base of the dashboard, and it actually generates kind of a rumble through the car. And in most Volkswagen Rs, that actually sounds and feels kind of cool, but in this car it's evidently not gotten on particularly well with a plastic trim component somewhere around the steering column, and it's actually rattling every time you add in a little bit of throttle. So it'd be nice to be able to turn that off through software, but I don't think you can. But that said, it hasn't been a problem in any of the other Volkswagen R products that I've tested recently. The engine itself is very flexible and grunty, and it pairs really well with the 7-speed wet clutch DSG automatic in this car. They're a great partnership. DSG autos tend to do best when they have a lot of torque at their disposal, and in this vehicle you certainly do, although not quite as much as a Golf R wagon, which actually gets 420 Newton meters of torque and is a fair bit quicker from 0 to 100 than this car. But as an SUV with over 1,700 kilos of weight to manage, the Tiguan R is really quite impressive. It does hold a good line through the corners. The chassis is super adjustable and well tuned. It is a real driver's SUV, this car. Turn-in is good. We've got a light engine and we've got a very low profile tire, so the Tiguan R just wants to change direction at the front end, and then adjusting your line mid-corner through the steering wheel or dabbing the brakes slightly will bring the rear end around really tidily as well. It's a fun and engaging car on a country road. That's actually where the Tiguan R is happiest, where it can really demonstrate the best of its chassis. In town, the steering is a little bit heavier than I would like. You can only choose from sport and race modes for the steering, not a comfort mode, so you can't get it to lighten up as much as I would prefer. And then additionally, that stiff suspension combined with very low profile tires and 21-inch wheels makes for a pretty tight and firm urban ride. And particularly if you drive through a pothole, you'll find that you get quite a bang through the body, as the tire doesn't have much passive insulation and the dampers hit their bump stops. And there's not a lot you can do to avoid that, even with the suspension in comfort mode. The main thing you do to avoid that is buy a Tiguan with a smaller wheel. The R-Line has 20s, the Elegance has 19s, the Life has 18s, and the Tiguan Adventure even has 17s. Very cushy indeed. It's a bit of a shame that for Australia you can't choose the 20-inch wheel for the Tiguan R, because it does fit. In Europe you can get a smaller wheel on this car, which would deliver a better ride quality for our roads, and then it might even allow you to get a spare in the back. I'm not sure. The fact that this car runs without a spare is a bit of an annoyance. But certainly this SUV, as mid-size crossovers go, is one of the most fun to drive on the market before you start looking at far more expensive cars like the Audi SQ5, BMW X3 M40i and the like, which is kind of the next rung of performance. Because of course you can't get a Mazda CX-5 or a Toyota RAV4 with R-like performance. This car's a bit unique in the market, and that's a very appealing factor about it. And the good news for Grid Edition buyers is that all of the dynamic benefit of the standard car is baked in right here, including R's new rear differential twin clutch diff that can channel 100% of torque that makes it to the rear to either wheel. So that's 100% of 50% engine torque to either of the rear wheels, which is pretty cool. Although this car doesn't have a drift mode like the Golf Rs do with the same tech. On the refinement front, you get a fair bit of road noise from these big, chunky, sporty tires, but no wind noise really to speak of. And then on the safety front, the one thing to keep in mind is that Volkswagen are really struggling to get blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert back in the Tiguan. It probably won't come back for a decent amount of time yet, but you do get the rest of the IQ Assist functions, including adaptive cruise, forwards and reversing AEB, a really good travel assist mode with firm lane centering, which relieves a lot of fatigue on trips, plus a 360-degree camera that makes parking super easy because you can really see what's surrounding the car on all sides very intuitively. So those are my opinions of the new Volkswagen Tiguan R Grid Edition, which is a great way to save a solid chunk of money when comparing it to the standard version of the Tiguan R, a vehicle with loads of luxury features that you might not actually need and therefore you don't want to have to pay for. This vehicle gives you a convenient option. However, I do think a lot of buyers are going to want the high-tech and high luxury stuff that comes as standard on that top-end car. The other problem for this spec of Tiguan is the existence of the 162 TSI R line, which continues to be really great, although really badly afflicted by supply shortages as well. So I would still consider signing up for the waitlist for that car. But hey, if you want a super high performance family SUV, you want it right now and you don't want to pay through the nose to get it, the Tiguan R Grid Edition at a touch under 70 grand drive away is a really good way to go. Very keen to know your opinions, so let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.